Hello, everyone, and welcome to the TDWI webinar program. I'm Andrew Miller, and I'll be your moderator. For today's program, we're going to talk about analytics catalogs are not enough, boost engagement with persona-driven journeys. And our sponsor today is Metric Insights. For our presentations today, we'll hear first from David Stodder with TDWI. And after Dave speaks, we'll be joined by Marius Moscovici with Metric Insights for a presentation and fireside chat. Before I turn the time over to our speakers, please allow me to go over a few basics. Today's webinar will be about an hour long, and at the end of their presentations, our speakers will host a question and answer period. So if at any time during these presentations you'd like to submit a question, just use an Ask a Question area on your screen to type in your question. If you have any technical difficulties during the webinar, you can click on the Technical FAQs area and you'll see technical assistance. And if you'd like a copy of today's presentation, please locate the resource window to download the PDF. Lastly, we are recording today's event and we'll be emailing you a link to an archived version so you can view the presentation again later if you choose, or if you'd like to share with a colleague. Again, today we're going to be discussing analytics catalogs are not enough, and our first speaker today is David Stodder. He's the Senior Director of Research for Business Intelligence at TDWI. As an analyst, writer, and researcher, Dave has provided thought leadership on key topics in BI, analytics, IT, and information management for over 2 decades. Previously, he headed up his own independent firm and served as Vice President and Research Director with Ventana Research. He was also the founding Chief Editor of Intelligent Enterprise and served as Editorial Director there for 9 years. With TDWI Research, Dave focuses on providing research-based insight and best practices for organizations implementing BI, analytics, performance management, and related technologies and methods. Welcome, Dave. And with that, I will hand it over to you now.
Thanks very much, Andrew, and welcome to everyone today. Thank you for joining us. We've got a good webinar where we'll be talking about the intersection of BI, analytics, catalogs, and how to increase the satisfaction of users and improve their experiences through persona-driven journeys. So I'm going to go for some TDWI research perspectives, and as Andrew mentioned, we're going to have a discussion a little bit later on. So let me just get with it. So data democratization, that's kind of really the starting point for empowering users. We see organizations in our research very intent upon democratizing the data and allowing more users across different operations to be able to work with data effectively. And so some of the things that we see in our research that are driving this is organizations want to be data-informed, data-driven in their operational efficiency and effectiveness. They want to improve operations. We see that often at the top of the list as organizations try to empower managers, frontline workers to be able to use data effectively to make daily decisions. Customer-centric innovation and responsiveness. So a lot of organizations have much more direct relationships with customers nowadays, and so they're picking up a lot of data, they're engaging with customers, and so they need to be able to make quick decisions, data-driven decisions. Data insights to strengthen business relationships, so to improve partnerships in supply chains, maybe a hospital network, a healthcare network, things like that. Much more can be accomplished, and particularly for customers and patients, if organizations can collaborate effectively and use data effectively. And then risk management and resilience, to be able to understand where risks are coming from, what to do about it, how to predict them, and be able to get that information to managers and frontline workers. So that's all part of democratization. And then so engaging with data, so to accelerate data-driven progress, speed to insight obviously is very important. So anything that is creating latency that's undue, like where there may be manual work, too much, not enough automation. So speed to insight based on trusted, more complete data is critical. Faster decisions in operational and customer-centric processes, as I mentioned. So trying to make it timely decisions so the time to insight is much faster. Improving ease of use. So we've been on a long progress towards trying to improve the ease of use of business intelligence, reporting, visualization, but also data integration, data preparation, data sharing systems. And so we're seeing new advances there. And then modernizing technologies to overcome legacy limitations, reduce IT burdens and dependency. Obviously, that's critical to empowering users, to making them less dependent on IT, and also getting IT out of the business of doing tedious and kind of routine things. I apologize for my slides being a little bit jumbled. The copies of the slides that we'll be sending out will be fixed. And so obviously going along with data democratization, is self-service. And we see in our research that 73% see self-service functionality and data democratization as either extremely and very important, as I mentioned. So the challenges there that organizations are facing is that the old thing, trying to enable access to the right data at the right time for the right people. It's just a never-ending quest to kind of get to that point. And we do see in our research a lot of frustration still with trying to get to accomplish that overarching goal. And often it's the case that organizations have expanded the number of tools. They've got lots of BI tools. And so the sheer number and variety of tools can add a lot of complexity, adds a lot of data duplication, as it creates inconsistencies, and it also creates a lot of disparate data silos, or BI silos, really. So that you're working with one tool, you have one platform, and that's hard to bring them together. And when users want to get to that complete view of something about customers or products or supply chain, it's very difficult. Users need access to trusted, accurate, and relevant data assets. They need to be able to trust that this is what they're working with is accurate. Often, if users are burned by that, say in a chart or a report or sharing things in collaboration that isn't accurate, that source is burned for good. I mean, it's hard to get their trust back. And then not enough personalization, which is going to be a major topic we're talking about today. The need for be able to customize, and this is really continuing, even as the tools are getting more user-friendly, to be able to customize the journey, to maximize the value of tools and increase engagement. So the next thing is really the importance of data and analytics catalogs and quality. This is another trend that we're seeing rising over the last few years in our industry. Use of data catalogs, use of analytics catalogs they're the main job to resolve data definitions and manage metadata, other information about the data, schemas, structures, location, quality. Of course, data catalogs in some ways have been with us for a long time, but they've really been advancing considerably in the last few years. Most organizations try to aim at an enterprise catalog, but we do see in our research that the largest percentage of TDWI in our research is for single application, single database, maybe departmental use, a data platform. And so that sort of builds in a problem of coordinating multiple catalogs. So there may be lots of different catalogs, maybe not all consistently in the same level of maturity, and in other words, completeness, and whether the catalog itself can be trusted and is updated. And so that becomes an issue. And we do see modernization with AI-infused automation is reducing manual work in catalogs, so this is a good step, but there's still a lot of confusion with multiple catalogs. BI semantic layers, that's kind of all part of this group of technologies around the semantic layer, semantic data integration. BI catalogs critical for, again, managing those definitions, calculations, hierarchies, so that they can be shared across different instances, that they're stable across visualizations, analysis, and workloads, but that, of course, is the goal, but it's not always the case. The semantic layers also can be inconsistent, and it's hard for users sometimes to know whether they can depend on them. And also, again, the scope is often limited to a single tool or application. And then the issue of data quality and trust, that kind of goes together with the catalogs, because catalogs and semantic layers are there to improve quality, and it's vital to maximizing the value of data. But we do see in our surveys that improving trust and data quality is at the top of the data management goal. It's still a very significant problem in organizations. The number one thing, poor data quality, it erodes trust downstream in dashboards, analytics, data-driven decisions and collaborations. And so it's an ongoing issue in organizations to try to clean up and improve data quality. Data governance, so data quality being the kind of offensive side, data governance being more around defending, so to protect the data, protect sensitive data, so setting up rules, policies, making sure you have good practices for protecting sensitive data, controlling access to sensitive data, aligning the data governance with security, and then procedures such as masking, anonymization, things like that, to make sure that they're all in sync and also complying with regulations that are out there. The haphazard user journey that, so describing the data democratization is kind of piecemeal, a little bit out of control. Users at different levels of expertise, they piece together content from multiple sources, at least inconsistent quality, and then also inconsistent adherence to rules and regulations. 33% say unifying data governance across a distributed environment is their top challenge. So again, a lot of data silos, a lot of BI silos, creating a data governance issue. Weakness, again, leading to problems downstream. So lack of trust, that things may be published or shared, that violate your internal rules. They might violate industry or legal regulations, violate quality standards. So again, a lot of difficulty that we're seeing in these areas. And then data stewardship, which is really important to making sure users are complying with regulations and also looking for the most trusted data sets. And so we see here that data stewardship is lacking. So that being expertise, the stewards being experts in policies, rules, they can mentor other users to adhere to regulations. 38% struggle to find the right people to be data stewards. So often data stewards have day jobs. That's not their title, although we're starting to see growth in that area, just titles of data steward. But often it's an application developer or a data administrator, someone who's involved in maybe a business group who takes on that responsibility. So there needs to be quite obviously a lot of automation to help them improve. And the chart here showing, we ask how overall, if your organization is successful with data governance, both on the offensive and defensive side. And we can see that most are somewhat successful, 19% very successful. So, it's feeling good about it, but there's a long way to go to improve. So solving challenges. So catalogs, governance, and observation is all areas that are very important for addressing the challenges organizations are facing as they're trying to empower users. Improving the semantic layer, the data analyst catalog, glossaries, this area, because it kind of be a layer to help users work with lots of different sources, data, multiple different sources, understand what they can trust, what data sets they can trust, know the data journey. And so it's effective in combating the difficulties in discovering, accessing, and sharing data sets. But as I mentioned, a lot of the catalogs are departmental and sort of distributed. And so that becomes trying to knit these together as a problem. So 32% of our research are very satisfied with the use to make it easier for search for and find data. 36 somewhat satisfied, so reasonable satisfaction, but room for improvement. 17% only 17% are very satisfied with coordinating or consolidating metadata across multiple catalogs. So this is clearly a pain point. The same for location transparent resources, to establishing a location transparent resource that covers all of the different catalogs and semantic layers. Improving monitoring and observability. So here we're really just trying to understand the user experience, where issues with data pipelines, the data life cycles, and the analytics and BI life cycles, really, whether it gets to the fulfilling the business purpose, that the outcomes are what organizations want, that they're solving business questions, developing insights, that their users are productive and working effectively. And so organizations need to improve their monitoring and just holistic observability to understand what the user experience is. And that is about having end-to-end visibility, seeing the entire life cycle to see how various issues affect the business outcomes and to have good visibility there. So this is an area where we're seeing a lot of innovation today. And then secondly, solving challenges to increase BI value and engagement. So this is really about looking at the user experience, making improvements to reduce complexity. So not having all that complexity on the user's shoulders, or really making them having to work closely with IT and kind of slowing them down. So bending that complexity curve through tools and practices that increase the value and satisfaction without entangling users in data complexity. And so automation is certainly very interesting to most organizations that we research. 31% prioritize automating discovery of actionable data insights. So try to get out of the sort of business of tedious things and automate discovery to make it faster. Agility and flexibility. So personalization, so we'll be talking about that quite a bit today, is key to fitting the BI and analytics to the democratized user requirements. You've got a variety of users, lots of different types of users, so the requirements and workflows. And then stepping up in the areas of data literacy. So this is about training, mentorship, the stewardship, as I mentioned, to increase proficiency among all users with data and their ability to communicate data insights, to make sure they're understanding what they're seeing, can use it effectively to make decisions, to solve problems, and can communicate what they're seeing and have discussions about it to really collaborate on a data level. It's also about accountability for data governance. So being able to know what data is trusted, why access controls are in place, why those are important, what kind of data is sensitive, what they can or cannot share, and how they work with it through their analytics. So human factors, this is really all, literacy is kind of a human factor issue. And so be thinking about the human factors. It's not just about tools alone for improving the having successful BI journeys. Okay, at this point, I want to ask a poll question to see where our audience is thinking right now. So the question is, to improve user experiences and maximize the value of BI and analytics, which of the following issues is currently your biggest challenge? And so, as I'm sure these may all be your challenge, but we're trying to see what is your biggest. So the first is, BI is too difficult for most users. Tool experiences are not well designed around personas and workflows. So there's too much of a burden on users to try to sort of figure out how to work with the data and set up the tools not closely aligned with what they're really trying to do, what their persona is, what their responsibilities are in the organization and their workflows. So that'd be number one. Second, we have numerous BI tools and platforms, but they are not well integrated. It is hard to discover, access, and integrate content. So that problem, that there's just too many tools, maybe too many silo tools, hard to pull it all together for key processes and discovery, data access, and being able to integrate that information, integrate the content. So that's the second. Third, data quality, consistency, and completeness are not trusted. And we do see this, often in our research. It's still, as I mentioned, particularly as organizations reach out to different types of data, and more data resources coming in, quality, consistency, and completeness are an issue. Fourth, data governance is not effective. We need to ensure trusted access and proper review before publishing and sharing of content. And we'll be talking about that in our discussion today, about being able to put good steps in place for governance and also for proper review. And this is often an issue. And then finally, we need better monitoring and observation of user experiences to prioritize improvement. So as I mentioned, this is an important area of advance to get the kind of view, the end-to-end view, to see how things are fitting together and where problems need to be addressed. All right, so let's take a look at the results. And so we can see here that it's pretty well divided. 13% are saying the BI is too difficult. So that's actually one of the lower percentages. So, but 32%, 32.6%, so almost 33%, are saying that they have numerous BI tools, hard to integrate them together. So this looks like that's the leading problem. 15.2% talk data quality, 23 or almost 24%. Data governance is the issue, and then 15.2% monitoring and observation being the issues. And so we'll be talking about some of these points in our discussion. Thanks very much. That's great. So it shows that really there's issues across the board, but really the numerous BI tools hard to knit it together is the biggest problem. Andrew, with that, I'm going to hand it back to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dave. It's now my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker today, who's Marius Moscovici with Metric Insights. Marius has over 20 years of experience in analytics and data warehousing with roles at Oracle, Integral Results, and Linden Lab. He was the co-founder and CEO of Integral Results and a leading BI consultancy that was acquired by Idea Integration. He was also formed and led the analytics group at Linden Lab. With that, Marius, welcome, and I will hand it over to you now.
Thank you, Andrew, and great. Thank you, David, for sharing all those great insights. I wanted to speak to you today about, a little bit about analytics catalogs, but then more importantly, like what is the customized user journey that's important there and why it's important. So before we jump into that, I think it's good to understand, what is the real process that you go through when you build a analytics catalog or BI portal, whatever you want to call it. And typically, irrespective of what tool or technology you use, you're going to be following the same kind of process, and that is that first you're going to connect to all of your sources of data and BI within the organization, whether you're bringing in KPIs, whether you're bringing in reports from Tableau, Power BI, whatever tools you have, as well as maybe links to other applications. You're going to connect to all those applications. You're going to onboard all this content, and then you're going to integrate oftentimes with the data catalog. So David talked about the importance of data catalogs and how they often hold a wealth of information, things like glossary terms, key definitions, information about where PI data is held, etc. Oftentimes you want to integrate that in with the information you're bringing in, so that's available to your users. You obviously don't want all that wealth of information locked away in a tool that only a small number of users in your organization use. You want to integrate it in. And then you bring that in together into a BI catalog that is all searchable and accessible and is governed by your security model, right? So there's some kind of a security sink in place. You obviously never want to reproduce security within your model. You don't want to like reinvent it inside of your catalog. Instead, you want to inherit it through your AD system, your LDAP, your assignments that you might have in particular tools, and that formulates then the content there and make sure that the right content is accessible to the right users. It's a space where that content can be consumed. And then the final step of the journey, and I would suggest probably the most important one, is the presentation. So it's all well and good that all this stuff is there in a catalog, but it's all success hinges on the ability to create a persona optimized experience that is delivered to your users in whatever form factor they need, whether that be on the desktop or mobile, or, in some cases even things are delivered to email, such that all that information you brought into your catalog adds value. And I'll talk about that now in quite a bit of detail. And give you the goal is to give you some specific examples of these kinds of personas and what might be effective journeys for them. So to hopefully stimulate your thoughts around this and have you think about that for your own organization. So let's start. As always, when you talk about a particular persona, it's important to first walk in their shoes, right? You want to think about this in the realm of what is their experience today? What are the pain points that they're having? And then look at solutions that solve those pain points, right? So let's start with this report consumer a persona, because that's probably the most common and the first persona people think about when they're thinking about putting up a BI catalog, right? The idea is that you've got a set of individuals out there, they're consuming reports day in, day out. And how do they do that today? Well, usually it's just a sea of bookmarks, right? You just have bookmarks to various tools in your browser, and then they sort of find them that way, or maybe they go into those tools and do searches to find things. And then they have there's all kinds of problems with that experience, right? They're constantly, when they do go into their environment, the Tableau or Power BI or MicroStrategy or whatever your BI tool environment is, they're constantly stumbling into obsolete reports because there's duplicative content there, maybe a version of the report that's old and they don't necessarily distinguish which is the good one and which is the one that was created 6 months ago by an analyst that's no longer with the company. Hard to distinguish between those. If they do find a report that's useful when they're looking for things, they don't necessarily understand the numbers. As David said, data literacy is a real challenge, or why do these numbers don't match up with with numbers I'm seeing in a different report, and also the users don't know what they don't know, in the sense that they might have access to a set of reports. They're looking for something that they don't currently have. They don't know if that thing exists and is available, but they just haven't been given access to it and they need to request access, or if it's something that's never been created and they need to go and request that it be created because everything is sort of locked down. They only see what they already have access to. So for this kind of a persona, right, you might think of essentially a catalog that is a delivery mechanism that gives you a kind of a smart, simplified portal experience, right? So here you can see the elements that might be typically part of that. So on the left-hand side, you've got an organization of content across different sort of categories. In the center, you have all that content represented, with a visual indicator, the name, and a little small thumbnail that gives you a visual cue of what's there. And then on the right, you have your favorites and your recently viewed content, right? So ways in which to create maybe smarter, more advanced types of bookmarking than what you might have in your browser, right? Recently viewed updates automatically as you view content. Favorites is your explicit indication of what it is that you're interested in. And then at the top, you see that there's an announcement. So it's very important in terms of adding value to be able to give people context as they're looking at visualizations. Data quality can be a problem in every organization. Even if you have great data quality checks, there's some days where maybe there's a problem with the data pipelining and things are going on, or there's some other issue that's happened. So you want to be able to have, to communicate to users that there are issues. So that in this example, hey, I know that there's a problem with the data. It's going to be updated soon. And these things can either be done automatically, generate automatically when you discover that there's a delay in the pipeline, or manually entered if there's some specific information that the analyst will provide, right? So that adds additional context. Another key component here will be on the left-hand side. You can see you can expand and collapse. You'll want to have, obviously, any large organization, lots of content. So ways to organize that into different hierarchies, and they're all browsable. That's important. If you're not necessarily searching, you can search up here at the top. And if you're not necessarily searching, you want to be able to see that. And then you want to be able to expose the metadata that you've collected in onboarding the content, whether you've done it through a workflow integration with a data catalog, or what your mechanism is. You want to be able to tell users, hey, is this content been certified? Who's certified? And what enterprise KPIs are associated with this? Maybe those enterprise KPI definitions come from your data catalog. Who are the owners? Who do I reach out to if I've got questions around this? Where does this come from? All those things make that accessible through some kind of a control where you can show that metadata, mousing over an info button or something of that nature, right? And then, of course, when you click on some object, you want to be able to drill down into detail, where you're going to be able to work with that visualization in the native tool, but without leaving that sort of catalog experience. So having everything kind of iframed, and then working with exactly the experience you have with that particular dashboard, where you are to have accessed it directly from within the tool. So that's that kind of gives you the high level picture. But then also, one of the things you want to do is you want to surface for users not just the things that I have access to, but also those things that they might not have access to, but they could request access for. So you see these little locks here. I can't see the image because I'm not that object is not available to me, but I'm aware that it's there. And if I were to click on it, then I get a pop-up that says, hey, you can request access, and I click on this button, and it goes into either some access request mechanism, whether it's emails going to people to get access, or ServiceNow ticket gets opened, or some other workflow happens within the analytics catalog itself. However you solve for that, the idea is that I can find content that I don't necessarily know about. I have access to the metadata for that content, and then if I'm interested in that content, then I can request it. And then, there's a workflow for granting me that content if it's appropriate. So these are the sort of the capabilities in that example. And if you think about, well, what did that example solve for, right? We took and organized all the content in one place. We only included the good stuff, right? So there was that one problem that the user might have had where they're stumbling across 3 versions of the report, but only one of them is good. That doesn't happen because you've deliberately published only the things into your catalog that are actually good. And active and certified, or at least verified by someone. Everything is presented with the context or the metadata, so I understand what terminology means. I understand how to interpret the information, and I'm able to discover the content. So for this particular report consumer, I've really enhanced their journey through this enhanced catalog experience. Now let's look at another persona. Imagine for a moment in your organization, you probably have people that, yes, they consume reports, but they really want to start with the high-level numbers. There may be quite a few reports that they have access to, and it's hard for them to follow it with the limited amount of time they have. And so what they really want is to see the high-level numbers, and then know, based on what's going sideways, look at the relevant reports that might tell them what's going on, and then take action on that, right? So don't make, if those users today, without, in the absence of a kind of a customized journey, there are just so many metrics, they're buried in all these different dashboards and tools and reports, and they have no way of knowing, without opening up all those reports, which of the particular KPIs require attention, right? And that oftentimes means that people don't look at that content at all. Right? So for that kind of a persona, you want a very different journey, a very different view. You might not start with dashboards at all. You might not start with that catalog view at all. Instead, you might start with a presentation of all their KPIs. So here you can see 16 different KPIs. They could be collected from data sources like databases. They might be coming from Tableau or Power BI. They may become existing reports. Wherever it is they come, the point is it's all consolidated in a set view. This view might be something that is preset for this persona, or it might be something that users have the opportunity to change and say, no, I really want this other KPI included in here instead of this one, where they customize. It all depends on what the needs are for that particular in organization or group. And the idea is that I can see the numbers at a glance in one place. I don't have to go to 16 different dashboards. I can see immediately based on stoplighting whether something requires attention or not, whether it's trending down from historical trends. I have the announcements there on the right-hand side, and I have the ability to filter at the top. So if the high-level numbers are telling me something's going on, I can quickly sort of go down to whatever level of detail I need to see if at a regional level or some other level of granularity the same issue exists. Right. So the announcements themselves could be things that are like before, telling me something if there's issues with data quality, but they could also be business related type announcements, things where you're bringing in information to tell people that, hey, something's going on, new is happening. We launched a new product here. There's been a change in a particular what's happening in a location. So the idea being, as analysts are discovering things that are going to affect these critical KPIs, they can just note them in whatever system is appropriate. We bring that information in, and then we present it to the user right here so that they get the information in context and they don't ring a fire alarm on something that can already be explained based on existing information. It saves your analysts a ton of time and creates a much better experience for users when they're consuming content to already know the explanation for why a particular number doesn't look right. And so that's that's really the idea. And then of course, if you want to be able to have this a launch pad for further analysis. So if a user clicks on one of these particular items, you want to take them to that dashboard where they can do an in-depth analysis of that particular KPI. So you've linked it now to the user directly to the appropriate dashboard. They don't have to think about, well, which one of my 20 bookmarks has the right dashboard for this. No, they just click on that metric. It passes them directly into that report. If they've set context, like, that we're looking at a particular region or area for those KPIs, it's passing those filters all the way through and just creates a seamless minimum number of clicks experience for the entire journey. So that's a key thing. And so that experience, what did it accomplish for this persona? Well, first of all, it only presented the user with the most critical metrics, didn't bother them with the things that they don't really care about. We highlighted the issues and anomalies for them so they know which items they should drill down to in right now based on performance. We provided context via that announcement capability. Sometimes people integrate alerts into these kinds of solutions, but things that tell you what's going on. And then we provided a single click experience to detail. So I saved them the mental energy to think about what dashboards do I have. Maybe I don't even know what dashboard covers that KPI. I don't need to know that. I can just click in and go into the detail and work with it. And again, I don't have to think about what tool it is. It's all integrated into the experience. So that's that persona. Let's look at a third one. Now, sometimes this happens where you see users where they every single dashboard in your organization, if you think about it, typically focuses on a particular subject area. You've got something for finance, looking at receivables, and you've got another dashboard that looks at something else in finance, and another one looks at manufacturing. For each particular domain, even there are many dashboards with it that cover the particular data sets that are specific to subject areas in that area, in that domain. So that presents a challenge for certain personas, because if you need to look at 4 or 5 different dashboards and you need to apply the same sort of criteria, I'm looking for my products and my geography to those dashboards, you find yourself that you've got to navigate this environment where information is scattered across multiple tools. You've got to set the same context in every dashboard you go into and every time. It's hard to kind of context switch and compare side by side what's going on and get a real perspective on what's happening in your function. So for that kind of persona, what you might want to do is create sort of more of a mashup type experience, right? So what you're seeing here is those 4 panels at the bottom are maybe 4 key components from specific dashboards that the user uses. And they are, they're not the entire dashboard necessarily. They're maybe just part of that dashboard, but the most important part of that dashboard. And it's all governed by a set of filters at the very top. So I can say, I'm looking at France. Let me switch across all countries. Let me switch to a particular country. That filter is now automatically passed to every single one of those dashboards underneath, and they would update live. And I'm seeing how that report changes. So I don't have to go in 4 different places. I can see the high-level numbers here represented from those dashboards in one at a glance with one set of filters applied to all of them. Of course, if I want to do further analysis, I should be able to click on one of these and then open up the full dashboard. You can see now that one chart that you saw as an example before. Now you've got all the charts that come around it. You've got additional filters, and I can do further analysis so that once I've identified that there's something that requires investigation, I'm taken into that dashboard. I can do an analysis, and I can pop right back to the high-level summary if I want to do more detailed follow-up analysis. So in that journey, what did we do? We mashed up multiple live dashboards, potentially across different tools. Maybe one of those was Power BI, maybe another one was Tableau, Business Objects, MicroStrategy, whatever you have. But the point is, I as a user don't care what they are. They're all together in one place. I've got one-click filtering across all those dashboards, so I can see, what's going on with a minimum number of navigation. I don't have to go back and forth between dashboards, and I have the ability to drill through from those high-level numbers directly to the report where I can do my detailed analysis. So I can go from summary to detail, from high-level charts to the more detailed charts with a single click. And that's made my journey a lot better. So now let's look at sort of finally maybe an executive view. So this, maybe executive isn't our right word, but imagine somebody who's got to really look through a lot of information and maybe they're not hugely data literate in the sense that they don't, today they need to come in. There's so many different metrics and things that are out there. They don't even know where to start. They would like to understand how the key metrics are performing. They want to know what's driving the key trends in their business. And they want to figure out when they're looking at something, they don't necessarily know what the next question is that they want to ask. It's very common in an organization. Data literacy is a real challenge. And sometimes people, okay, well, this number's not going right. What should I look at to figure that out? An analyst might know, but they don't know. So for these types of individuals, you might want to have a more sort of nuanced, multi-layered experience. You start by giving them the high-level numbers in their area, right? So you've got my KPIs up here, and then you've got a number of different tools that you're giving them. Think of this journey as an analytical application that's serving them. And so if I want to find patterns between different KPIs or easily access the things that I should access all the time, I can go to that. Or I want to understand, what are the drivers or the FAQs that I need to look at for a particular experience. So for instance, if I click on the KPIs, maybe I go from that summary level view to a really detailed view where I've brought a breakout by country, geography, by product of all my KPIs. I've got my, how are things performing relative to historical numbers, so I can get that sort of at a glance, really dense view. And again, from here, I should be able to go to relevant dashboards to do more analysis, right? So it's similar to what I showed you before. So that's one possibility. But I may also want to, once I've seen a particular item, take a look and say, well, what are the things I should be looking at? What are the questions I should be asking? So this is sort of a toolkit you might want to use to help with this audience with data literacy, to say, well, I'm looking, here's the top line KPIs, here are the types of things that you might want to ask, what are we doing versus how are we doing versus target, or, for top line KPIs, for gross margin, for gross sustainability, take the information that your analysts know, the kinds of common questions that they are answering for users, package them into a set of FAQs, and then in this particular persona, create a launch pad where they can click on this particular FAQ, and then they're taken to the appropriate dashboard to answer the question, or they're taken into an experience where they're, where that question is explained, and then the technique to analyze it is produced. So you're creating a self-service experience for users, or rather than immediately having to call up the analyst and ask about something, they have some tools that you've given them to guide them through the process of answering their own questions. Right? With the tools you already have, your dashboards, your ThoughtSpot solutions, or whatever it is that you have created, link those to that for your users, right? And then again, the end result is still going to oftentimes be that dashboard, that Power BI or Tableau dashboard. But you're not starting there. You're ending there based on the journey that you've taken them, and you're ending at the right dashboard in order to answer the question that they need to answer to understand the KPI that you presented at the beginning. So this example, a little bit more complex, a little bit more layered, more nuanced. But the idea is that you're taking that. It's a similar concept a little bit to that sort of earlier model that we showed you, maybe a combination of some of those models, where you're taking the high level metrics, drilling to a detailed breakout, maybe in multiple layers, you're providing FAQs to drive analysis, and in the end, you're providing a single click to the relevant dashboards. So I've given you a number of examples, and before I wrap up here, I want to just sort of zoom out for a moment and give you the sort of the high level picture here that's common across all those examples. This is the most important takeaway I think you should be walking away with, and that is that if you think about a catalog, a place where all of your content is there, and you can search and find the right content, that activity of searching for something, clicking through it, and finding the right content is enormously valuable, but it provides one-time value. If I don't know what that content is and I need to search for it, that's the right solution for me, right? But it's not necessarily the solution that's going to provide users with sustained value, right? And I get this question all the time. I can't tell you how many times I've talked to people and they say to me, Marius, we implemented a catalog and we saw that right off the bat, we got this big spike in usage when we launched it. And then, 3 to 6 months later, there's not a lot of people using that catalog. And what I want to say to you is, if you do that, if you just implement the catalog and you don't implement custom journeys, that's exactly what you should expect, because you're providing one-time value. Somebody new to the organization can go in there and find the right dashboards for them. Somebody who's trying to locate a dashboard that in an area they've never used before can do that. But after that process, it's easy enough for them to bookmark that content and come back to it. The thing that if your goal is to provide sustained ongoing value to users and generate a high level of engagement with that content, then what you need to think about is the types of journeys I talked about today. Things that provide ongoing recurring value, minimize clicks, minimize discovery, time required for discovery, and get people to the content they need as quickly as possible in order to answer the questions that are on their mind. So minimizing clicks to value, that's the key. And that's the common thread across all of these examples I showed you. They're formed based on an understanding of what the persona needs, and then a design of a solution for that persona that minimizes clicks to value, and therefore time to value for that individual. So with that, I'm going to pass it over back to you, Andrew, for the next segment.
Terrific. Yeah, thank you very much, Marius. That was such a good presentation, very comprehensive there. Now we'll move into the fireside chat, and I'll ask that Dave rejoin us. And Dave, with that, I'll pass it back over to you.
Thank you very much, Marius. That was a fantastic presentation. So much there to talk about. So before we get to we want to make sure we have enough time for audience questions, because I'm sure we've got some good ones. Maybe we can just talk a little bit about, some of the issues that I think you brought up in your presentation that we saw in our research. Improving the user experience, boosting engagement. So if you had to boil down some of the things that you said, what can organizations do to address, because we do see user frustration, and I think that you offer a lot of possible solutions to that, but how would you sort of boil down that answer? What should organizations do? What steps should they take first to improve user experiences and boost engagement so people don't sort of fall away from using the BI systems?
Yeah, I think the most important thing sort of at a conceptual level is that, if you think about how we do things today in BI, a lot of times we're really looking at this very tactical, low-level view where we're like, well, what's the question somebody wants to answer, and how can I build a dashboard to help them answer that question, right? And that's necessary, of course, right, to solve the problem, but it's not sufficient, right? And what we need to do fundamentally is zoom out from that and look at more like, okay, the person that is using this content that I'm building this for, what is their current journey with analytics, right? So you want to ask not just what is this very narrow problem they're trying to solve, but I think you want to understand, well, what are all the analytics they're trying to use, and what are their frustrations with analytics? Like I showed you in those examples, all of those use cases are tailored to solve specific frustrations that are occurring. So whether it's surveying your organization, or whether it's talking to people and having a whiteboard session and getting their feedback in meetings, whatever mechanism works best within your particular culture, I think it's very important to get to a really detailed, fine-grained understanding of what are the pain points that people are having, and not just with a broad brush stroke across the entire organization, segment it by different populations, and start with the highest impact populations, of course, right? The ones where if you can get them really excited and getting a lot of additional engagement from that analytics, you'll be able to create a virtual cycle and roll it out to other ones. But typically, that's the approach: is you take you identify a population, you identify the personas within that, you identify what their pain points are today, and then you craft. We're using some of the building blocks that we talked about, a solution for them. You look at also, we didn't talk about this, but you look at the consumption model for them. Sometimes people need to consume their content on mobile because they're on the road. Well, that experience should be very different from the desktop, or maybe they need to do both, and so you need to make sure that you have a responsive experience that is seamless between mobile and desktop, right? So all of that has to be factored in when you're thinking about this. But the key, I think, distinction, David, is that the answer to your question is take a level up in abstraction and don't just look at the detail. Look at the overall journey for your users.
And I think one powerful idea was getting away from just one-time value. I mean, I think you talked about the one-time value of the catalog and sort of connecting that to the customer journey. But I think often, things in BI tend to be kind of this, but not connecting them together. It ends up being, a lot of duplication, repetition, but also just sort of focusing on too much on just like the one thing you're trying to do. But I think the journey idea kind of builds a bigger thought around that. Maybe that's why I see it.
No, that's right. You've got this like fragmentation of solutions, right? Where that develops over time, and that happens in every organization because it's a natural thing. You're sort of solving everything incrementally. You only have so many resources, and they're focused on building out whatever is sort of the highest pain point at the moment. But over time, it doesn't necessarily result in a cohesive solution. So,
how about the idea of customizing BI journeys and for important personas? I mean, just from the experience that you guys have had in the marketplace with customers, are there, pitfalls that organizations run into, like barriers? I mean, I don't know if they're political barriers in the organization or people more than technology, but, what is your vision for sort of how that should get started in organizations and organizations can be successful with that?
I mean, there are a number of different sort of, I think in my mind, kind of two strategies that you can follow. At the core, what you want in both cases is you don't want to boil the ocean. You can't do the entire organization at once necessarily, even if the goal is to deploy enterprise-wide. So the question is, what's going to be the most influential first step to take? So the two strategies that we see employed are either one, kind of a top-down, where you maybe start with the executives and create a journey for them, and have use that success of that effort to then justify the additional effort that might be required to do. Once they see it, they're going to want it for their organization, right? So that you get buy-in that way. So kind of a top-down approach that oftentimes works. Another approach that you use is sometimes you identify a particular segment within your user community that you feel is particularly underserved today. You might be underserved is you look at their consumption of analytics and it's just not where it needs to be. Lots of content that exists there that aren't using it very much. You look at usage reporting and you identify opportunity areas based on that usage reporting for your BI stack to say, well, this particular group, we really have a big opportunity here. They're not using the analytics as much as other parts of the organization. Let's come up with a solution for them. You create a persona, identify personas and solve for them. And then you use the success you've achieved there to then go and then replicate that across the rest of the organization. Because usually the first solution can be a showcase piece that then you can take and do show and tell with all the rest of the, and then get by with the rest of the organization. And we see that happening a lot. So that's sort of more of a, instead of a top down, that's more of a kind of an organic word of mouth type experience. And we see that happening when one organization spits it up. Maybe it initially launches and maybe it's a departmental solution, and then another department compounds another department. Next thing you know, you've got, everyone in the organization has come along because they've seen and have heard about the success that their peer groups have.
And it probably improves collaboration too, because it probably points out where, different types of decision makers need to be working together, or maybe they need something that's over in this Tableau group, set and Power BI, then maybe they can bring it together more effectively.
Yeah, that's so true. And I think you find so much, I mean, I hear so many organizations telling me that they've discovered that there's just a a lot of times effort is duplicated for the reason you just mentioned. Everybody's in silos, and then some other Tableau groups already created content that actually could be useful to them, but they're not aware of it because they don't have access to it. And then, so like having this unified single pane of glass with discoverability ultimately saves a lot of effort it generates this virtuous cross-pollination of ideas across the organization.
Yeah. Well, what about the role of the analytics catalog? Maybe just sort of talk about that a little bit more. How do you get started with that? How do you set that up to make sure it's going to be valuable? And maybe a little bit how it differs from, say, the data catalogs that we have out in the industry. I think you talked some about that, but yeah.
Yeah, but no, that's a good distinction. So typically the data, let's talk about the data catalog first and then sort of the general the setup process. So the analytics catalog, it is really focused typically at the BI layer. But even more importantly, if you think about the data catalog for a moment, right? What is that normally in an organization? Well, it's a crawling process, right? Your data catalogs fundamentally will crawl your existing data structures, and they'll bring in all the tables. And then people will come in there, and then they will maybe identify what's certified. They will maybe add metadata. They'll add glossary terms. All those things. They'll enrich that data, but it contains everything. They'll flag what has PII data or curate that. But the problem is that entire content is relevant to a very small community in your data governance team. Certainly wants to know everything that's there, where all your PI data, etc. is. But the consumers of information, whether they be end consumers like the report consumers, or even the analysts who are building reports, they don't want all that. They don't want to know about 150 tables of which like 110 are old duplicated content. They want the good stuff. I'm trying to build a report as an analyst. Well, okay, first of all, I want to know, does that report already exist, right? Is somebody else already built it? The analytics catalog searching for a report tells me that, right? Because I'm searching and I see another group that's created stuff. It's discoverable to me, I request access. But if that's not the case, if it doesn't already exist, the next question I want to know is, well, okay, what are the data sets that people are using for this particular area of analysis that I should be using, right? I don't want to reinvent the wheel. I want to use the same data set that's verified for sales performance analysis that maybe other reports of similar nature use. Excuse me. So the idea is that the way that the data catalog and BI and analytics catalog work together is that you bring into the analytics catalog just the good stuff, just that tip of the iceberg, the part of that content that's in your data catalog that's certified, that's good, that has content against it. You have lineage against which reports are using it. And then people can use the analytics catalog when they're searching for things to say, oh, there's no report here, but I can see that this table is what's used for similar reporting. Let me go use this table to build that, right? And then the glossary terms and all the other information that you have in your data catalog are then all visible at the point of consumption by your regular users, so you're building context and understanding. That's the other point of integration. So they're separate, but they shouldn't be disjoint. They should be consolidated into a single solution, where the best information from the data catalog flows into the analytics catalog. It may be supplemented, as you mentioned, David. Oftentimes, these things are there may be multiple sources for data governance type information, right? So it's supplemented with all those sources, and it's accessible in one place to both regular users and analysts.
Yeah, that's great. That's really helpful to hear that distinction. Because obviously data catalogs have been around for a while, but I like that, the concept of the analytics catalog, really more around the user and their journey, really. So data literacy, I talked a bit in my presentation about, as you did too, data literacy, observing user experiences. What are you seeing as practices that are working out there for data literacy?
I think that the most important thing is to look at, for data literacy, this is another one of those, you can boil the ocean and come up with all kinds of terminology and never be done with that effort, right? Because there's always more to do on that. I think what you want to look at is look at the pain points you have within your organization. Where are people? First of all, there are two things. First of all, focus on the reports that get the most consumption and making sure that those have a rich set of metadata around them to be able to, and accessible at the point of consumption, so that you understand, what all the things in these reports, what are the definitions of all the different columns, what are from a KPI perspective, what they map to, what's related content to this, and so on and so forth, right? So you want to do that across, and you want to start that across the most commonly used content, right? Because that's the place where you're going to get the most bang for your buck. And then you want to look at, well, what metadata do I need for consumer of that content? Again, thinking with a journey in mind. What's the enhanced metadata? What's the enrichment that's necessary here in order to give people the right context to proceed? And that will help you. Is it definition of customer, or is it definition of KPIs, or is it knowing what universe of other dashboards are related to this so I can go do my analysis? Prioritize that list of things and then tackle it in the order of value, because the reality is you're never going to be done with this. The whole process of creating data literacy is a journey that never really ends. You just continuously do it. So the most important thing is to know what that next step is and make sure that each next step you take in that journey has incremental value. Right? And the way to do that is just be very thoughtful about that user journey.
Well, that's great. Well, I think we're going to hit some governance topics during the audience Q&A. So, Andrew, why don't I hand it back to you now for audience Q&A?
Terrific. Yeah, thank you very much. That was a great discussion. We do have a few audience questions, so I'll jump right into them here. Marius, this is for you. What level of support and engineering is required to create experiences like this? And around what scale does a company need to be operating at to create experiences like this?
So, again, that will depend on the tool, right? So I can speak to that for our tool. I can't really, if you're building something from scratch, it's whatever technology you're using, of course. If you're using, one of our competitors, is however they work. For us, the customized sort of experience there is sort of the skill set required to completely customize from scratch is over that JavaScript, HTML, CSS. But we have also a library of templates that we provide, right? Because as you can imagine, while these journeys are distinct, oftentimes across a large sample population, there's patterns that develop, right? You end up having, like I showed, the kind of patterns I showed you. So many of the things I showed you there, for example, in our case, templates already exist. For us, we help customers, so they don't need to necessarily have those skills. We just help them. We use oftentimes existing templates as a starting point, add a few modifications, and then provide that to them. So if you're doing it all yourself, then usually it is that web development skill set. If you're leveraging Metric Insights or some other vendor, then hopefully that vendor has resources that you can tap into that can help implement that. If you don't actually have the customized skills or templates that you can start with and just set configurations for, etc. Right? And then as far as the size of organization, I mean, obviously the larger the organization, the more people are using content, the more critical this kind of, the more pain is felt. But it doesn't necessarily have to be a massive organization. However, I would say that, if you have fewer than 100 dashboards across your entire organization, probably creating the journey it's just something that you probably have such pain in other areas, like basic data quality, or you don't have coverage across your existing dashboards, etc., then it might be harder to prioritize a catalog. But if you're looking at hundreds or thousands of pieces of content, when you look across dashboards and Excels and PDFs and everything people are consuming, then absolutely you're at the scale where having a cataloging experience is going to be essential, because the kinds of things like we talked about today are going to be very painful.
Okay, terrific. I think we'll squeeze one last question in here. So Marius, again for you, with regards to the individualized dashboards, do these need to be created by the BI team for the end user after finding out their specific needs, or is this something that the end user could create themselves?
It's a mix. We see it in both environments. In some cases, we see dashboards created by the BI team for the end users. In other scenarios, we see more of a self-service model where the end users themselves maybe are literate enough to be able to do, they're given, let's say, Power BI data sets, and they build their own reports and publish them. We see other, people leverage things like ThoughtSpot and other kinds of more self-service type analytics, and then post up, create pins or basically create like search type analytics and push that out there. So it varies. The idea is that if somebody's creating something, whether they're technical or not, and that asset is something that should be shared within the organization. It's not just my own solution, but something worthy of being shared with my group or with other peers. Then there should be a process by which it gets vetted and published to the catalog. And you want that process to be such that you're validating that, in fact, the rules that were used to create that are consistent, so that you don't have 3 different assets in there saying that sales are 3 different numbers and confusing users, right? So as long as you have a process for that, you can have your end users publish content.
All right, fantastic. Well, unfortunately, this does leave us with no time remaining today, but please allow me to thank our speakers. We did hear from David Stodder with TDWI and Marius Moscovici with Metric Insights. We also would like to thank Metric Insights once again for sponsoring today's webinar. And please remember, we did record today's webinar and we'll be emailing you a link to an archived version of the presentation. Also, if you'd like a copy of today's presentation, you can locate the resource window to download the PDF. Finally, I'd like to remind you that TDWI offers a wealth of information, including the latest research, reports, and webinars about BI, data warehousing, and a host of related topics. So I encourage you to tap into that expertise at tdwi.org. And from all of us here, let me say thank you so much for attending. This does conclude today's event.